Hi, it's Mark back with another Photoshop tutorial, or possibly two. We're going to be looking at colour theory, but not so much that this will be a lovely video to watch to help you with your insomnia, but enough to keep you interested because there'll be lots of example pictures to actually try things on. As far as colour theory is concerned, we'll be looking at the very basics of colour theory, the colour wheel, and learning things like complementary colours, which will then help us go on to use those in sampling colours, creating swatches, colour regrading pictures, toning pictures, and so on. So a lot of practical stuff to get through, including looking at some of the tools such as this screenshot you can see here, which is color.adobe.com, which will take some of the legwork out for us really, so we can give it a colour and it'll tell us what the complementary colours are. So we can use tools like that. I'll give a little overview of that, because if I just click on, move myself out of the way, there is an extension already in Photoshop for Adobe Colour, and here it is, and we'll be looking at that too. The concept is there's all the various colour styles in there, such as complementary colours and so on. So if we pick that red and we want a complementary, we do that and it tells us what the complementary colours are. We can put that to a swatch. We can then use those in our colour regrading or colouring of a picture. But we'll get to all that as we go through. If that's something that interests you though, stick around. I'll play the titles and we'll roll our sleeves up on the other side and start with a little bit of theory. Okay, here we go. Honestly, not much colour theory. This is more a stroll through some of the things so we're familiar with terms before we actually get on to practical examples, within which we will look at some of the terms we've used to make colour selections, including finding a picture of our own, by the way, and getting tools to take out a swatch, a range of colours to represent that for us, because we may then want to use that in another picture. But let's see how it goes. Let's get some of the basics and the terminologies and agree a level playing field first. I promise this won't be more than 2 minutes. There's a colour wheel. It's an RGB style one. So firstly we have primaries, and they are, in this case, for RGB. And I'm going to major on RGB for the reason that your phone is RGB, your tablet's RGB, your computers are RGB, your eye is RGB. So they're your primaries. Incidentally, in the RGB world, if you mix those primaries together, you get white. Secondary colours, they're produced by combining the primaries. So red and green make yellow. Then you've got tertiary colours. The tertiary colours mix a primary and a secondary. So here we have a red and yellow making an orange, and so on. Complementary colours are colours from the opposite sides of the wheel. You get more contrast, and depending on the colours, and we will do this by the way, it's good for picking one out for shadows and one for highlights when you're colour regrading. Monochromatic, well, the best example of that I suppose is black and white. If you think of all the various shades between white, all the various shades of grey, right through to black. But generally it means you pick one colour, be it a primary, secondary, tertiary, whatever. You take the one colour and you take shades from it. Analogous, right, that's just picking three that are side by side. Triadic is three evenly spaced around the wheel. They don't have to be primaries or secondaries, it's just three evenly spaced around. It's a bit like the complementary, but because they aren't totally opposite each other in the wheel, they are less contrasty, if that is indeed a word. And then tetradic, which is four, but again they're evenly spaced around. And then of course we've got temperatures. You're used to this in your sliders in Lightroom. If you use this, a quick way of adding, or Adobe Camera Raw filter in Photoshop, where you add some temperature, you cool things off with blues, or you warm them up with yellows. Well, it's not just those two colours. Hue, saturation and luminance. Hue is your actual colour, it is the colour. The saturation is the intensity of that colour, and luminance is the brightness of that colour. So it's interesting to know about luminance when we talk about luminosity masks. We may not cover luminosity masks, but I do have a whole tutorial on them, which I'll link above now. So go and explore that. Then when we talk about tinting, what is that? Well, There's three terms here: shade, tint and tones. If you take a colour, a hue, and you start adding black, you are shading it. If you hear the word tint, it's taking that hue and you're adding white to it. Tones, so when you add grey to something, you actually start to change the tone. You will be toning a colour. And finally, and I did say this is the main end of the theory, by the way, folks, less than 2 minutes, I hope, RGB and CYMK. If you combine these colours over here together, you get white. If you combine these colours over here, you get black. This is additive, so you get red and a green added together make yellow. But over here, if you take yellow and take away cyan, you get green. So the more colour you add over here, the darker things I get, and it tends to be more for print media. Whereas over here, the more colour you added, it tends to get lighter. And this is for screens, phones, tablets and eyes. And that's all I'm going to say on colour theory, except we are going to use some of those terms. And this is the first picture we're going to use them on. Now, all the pictures in here, bar the ones that we get from stock, are in the bundle, linked down below in the comments below this video. The ones from stock come from Pexels. Pexels is a free plugin for Photoshop, and here it is here, where you can search for, and you can see I've searched for city and pulled this one out from there somewhere. You can search for pictures, browse through them, select them, they're downloaded, they're put into your projects, your composites or whatever, all legitimate, all free. I'll put a video up above now, and that will show you how to get Pexels, how to install it and how to use it. It's really good for finding resources to build up composites. So where it is a Pexels image, I will not be including it in the bundle. You go and get it from Pexels, because then you see the accreditation of the person. This particular image, which we're going to be using first, is City Street Photo 378570. And if we have time to get through things today, we're also going to be looking at this picture, of which I've got a YouTube tutorial showing you how to start off creating pictures like this. I tend to do pictures where I put things inside light bulbs. I'll link to that one now. We'll be looking at a more blank negative space canvas, which is this one. And if there's time, we'll also get round to looking at this one. All these three are mine. They are in the link down below for you to go and get. So if you want to pause and get them now, please feel free. Meanwhile, we've got a job to do using some of the colour terms we've learned on this particular picture. Okay, before we get started, we need to make sure we've got our colours and swatches and such. So if you don't actually have them set up and don't see them, if you come to Window and then you choose Colour, with my colour, I've also got my swatches, gradients and patterns. If you don't, go away and grab those. We won't be using patterns today, but go away and grab them until you have them up here. Your colour display might not look like this. I choose this one. I particularly prefer this one because I see the wheel where I can move my hue around inside, or choose indeed the slider, which you're probably very familiar with on other colour filters and effects in Photoshop. And then from within there, you can actually look at the brightness and the saturations. Or again, you can choose to do that with the saturation slider and the brightness or luminance slider. When you select the colour, it becomes, in this case, my background colour. If I choose the foreground here and put another colour in, that goes into my foreground. And you'll see over here where you have your foreground and background colours, it's also there. And so D would always still take you back to default, and X still takes you back and forward between foreground and background colouring. If you want to change this to a particular look, then it's this little box up here, and you can have it as sliders for RGB itself. You can have other colour wheel, which is what mine will look like, but whatever you want to do to taste, as long as you can get access to changing brightness, luminance and saturation. Swatches we'll come back to in a little bit, but I'm going to start here using something called colour opposites. I'm just going to demonstrate that first with a quick curves layer. So I'm going to put a curves layer on here. Now typically, I'll just give myself a bit more room. Typically you would use curves to put a bit of contrast in, which is usually some sort of gentle S. Incidentally, I've got a tutorial all on curves, lots and lots of things you can do with curves. I will link to that one above now. Check it out later. So that's your traditional curve, but you can also come in and start to play with the individual color channels. Now, we're on blue here. The opposite of blue, if I click there and drag down, is yellow. That's not complementary, but it's an opposite. It can be a bit confusing, but they are different. So everything above the line would introduce a blue, and of course down here it would introduce it in the shadows, and up here it would introduce it in the highlights. Just reset that. In green, again above the line is green, south of the line is magenta, that is the opposite of green, and red. Above the line is red and below the line is cyan. Okay, so they're called colour opposites, and it's worth knowing that. So I'll just put that little S curve back in. Oops, went the right way, wasn't it? What time is it? It's 10:30 at night, that's why. And I haven't had a beer. Perhaps I should go and get a beer. So I've put that in, and I'm now going to choose my blue channel, and I'm going to click an anchor point in the middle, and this is the shadows and these are the highlights. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring that up to put a bit of blues into the shadows as opposed to yellows, and I'm going to bring this down, so I'm putting a bit of yellows in the highlights. So we could have, so using opposites, which is part of colour theory, what we're using here is a curves layer to actually do a colour opposite toning of this particular picture. So you've got before and after. Okay, I'm going to go to pace on this. You can always pause and rewind. Rewind. Can you remember cassettes? I've still got a Sony Walkman which I play cassettes on. I think the last one was Deep Purple, made in Japan. It's a really old cassette and it's a bit stretched at parts, but it's still a fantastic album if you want to check it out. Right, let's stick a gradient on this. So in gradients, if you click on gradients, these are all you most recently used. You've got a thing called legacy. So in amongst all this list, you've got something called legacy. If you do not see your legacy gradients, come up here and choose a legacy. Within legacy, you've got various colour harmonies, and we're going to pick one. I'm just going to use that one. But while we're on, if you come down here, it's worth snooping around because you've got things such as these, which are used for photographic toning. Once we get to grips with this quick part on gradients, you might want to go and play with those. But anyway, I've picked this particular gradient, slapped it on top, and as you can see, it's made this picture so much better. So, not really. I'm going to double click on the gradient, and I'm going to double click on the actual gradient itself. And in here, we were talking about, in the shadows, we were talking about blues. So let's get some sort of blue heading towards purple, I think. That's, you know what, that's psychological. I just mentioned Deep Purple, made in Japan. So there we go. And at this end, we're going to go for yellows. I'm playing a bit fast and loose with these colours. Very poetic license, because that isn't blue opposite of yellow here. This is like a purple and a mustard. But bear with me. Oh, and incidentally, the end results here, I'm not bothered if you like them or not. It's more important to come away learning the techniques. So I might not put the right flavours together in a meal for you, but if I can teach you how to use the various tools and so on, you can then go away and make your own. That's the idea. So we've got that. I'm just going to stick this into soft light probably. There you go. And this is something I sometimes like to do. Incidentally, do play with these as well. You know, have a look at what the other blend modes do. You don't have to know what they do. It's great if you know what they do. You don't have to know what to do. If you can then just run through them and see the effect on screen, it's up to you. You know what I think I'm preferring? Overlay, now that I've done that and said that, but I am going to bring the opacity down. When I've got very linear pictures such as this, I like to have a bluer, darker, purpley type tint at the bottom to represent you've come down through the atmosphere through lots of layers, and it's more hustle and human and such. Whereas at the top, you've got evidence of light rays possibly coming through and lighter. So that's just one of the ways I would look at colour blending. A day city scene, I would always tend to use these colours. So there you are, we used curves and we used gradients, and the colours we used were part of the theory. I didn't have a slide at the beginning, but these were opposites, and we demonstrated what those opposites were using our curves tool earlier. Let's go to the next picture. Okay, so let's make this a little bit bigger with Control 0. Now what we're going to go through is very methodical, and it seems a little bit cumbersome, but this is just a way of swapping various colours around. And if you like, once we've achieved this, you'll know more about some of the tools. But then when we go into swatches, you'll realise why swatches are so much easier to use when you're colour grading pictures. So bear with me. The first technique we're going to use as well links back to a video I've already linked to called Luminosity in Photoshop. So I'm not going to go into all the detail on that. You have to take it on face value and check that video out. Safe to say, channels, and look for the one which has got the most contrast here. And the reason why I want most contrast is because I'm going to colour grade between the darks and the lights. So red, green, blue. And I think you'll agree that blue has the brighter whites and the darker darks. So if I Command or Control on the PC, click, I get a selection of a basic luminosity values. I'll go back to layers and I'm going to apply an effect. Now when you apply an effect and you've already got a selection, it inherits that selection. So I'm going to go for a solid colour. And that colour I'm going to use is white, just for the moment. And a layer mask, black hides and white reveals. And greys in between that vary according to the greyness of how much is revealed. So you can definitely see this is much brighter, but in the darker bits it's not so much so. And we'll call this highlights. Let's Control J or Command J to copy that and call it shadows. Now if I invert that mask, it'll do the opposite. And then if I change the colour to black, we've now got we're not going to stick with these colours, but we've now got black applied to the shadows, as you can see, and we've got white applied to the highlights, as you can see. And that in itself is not a bad effect. You might want to just try doing that in some of your pictures. It's like a massively desaturated, highly contrasted effect, but there's enough colour to come in to give interest. And if you change the blend modes and change the opacities, there's a whole gamut of editing effects there to be pulled out. But we want to use this to apply some colour grading using the colour theory, in this case complementary colours. So I don't know what my complementary colour is going to be, but I do know what my base colour is to complement off, and that is I want to come in here and I want to get something that's a bit more I don't know, earthy, because this is a bit tending towards autumnal. So I'm going to come over here and I want some sort of dark brown to orange, I think, in there, something around about that sort of colour. But you know what, I've got not a Scooby as to what the complement to that is. So what I want to use is one of the Adobe tools. I showed it in the introduction, and it's here. It's Adobe Color Themes. And if you don't see this, then if you come up to Window Extensions, Adobe Color Themes, it should pop it on your canvas for you. If I double click on this, because I need to rescue this value here, 251803, or remember all of these, well, I'd rather just do Control C. It's already highlighted and I've got that. I'm going to put that on my foreground colour. So if I double click on that, or single click on that, and Control V, I've now got that in my foreground. I said this was methodical and a bit clunky, but we're learning about moving colours around and it'll become better when we do swatches. So let's go back into here, and I'm interested in complementary. It's already on complementary, but for which colour? That colour there, that's my active colour. This button here says set the selected colour from the active colour. So if I do that, it's actually selected it. Okay. I'm now going to click down onto this layer. The complementary colour it is calling out to me is this one. You can see that in the wheel. I want to put that as an active colour now. So click to set the active colour. That was to bring the active colour in. This is to take the active colour and set it. I click that. It's affected that. It's affected that. I'll close that. I've now got complementary colours within the shadows and within the highlights. And so now it's just a case of blending these in. I tend to do things in extreme, as I've probably mentioned already in this video, but I certainly have my other videos to demonstrate things. And at the moment, this is looking pretty extreme. So let's just do one at a time. Shadows. That's the colour I wanted in, and I'm going to go to overlay. I'll go before and after. It certainly has started to put that earthy colour in. And highlights. Let's put that into overlay too. Now that in itself might appeal to you. It does not to me. So a couple of things I would do with this is, firstly, I would one at a time probably bring the opacity down on this. Instantly, when I'm adjusting my faders, if you see banding quickly run down, it's because running my video screen capture at the same time does put a tiny lag on what I'm doing. And I think that's not too bad for what I want. Possibly a bit more. Yes, okay, we'll do that. And then bring these highlights back in and bring the opacity down on the highlights to about there. Okay, I'm going to select both of those, stick them in a little group and call it complementary colour. Oh, can't spell colour, hang on. Oh, I did, I fixed it. So complementary colour grade. And so our before and our after. And what brings that together is the fact that the colours were complementary. And if you remember right at the beginning, we said with complementary, you get two colours that produce a bit more dynamic range. They produce more contrast to it. And I kind of think that's okay. Some of the things you might want to do to change the overall look is to contain this to within the bulb and the reflection, in which case you can just stick a mask on, B for your brush tool. The mask is white, so you want to do D for default colours, X to get black as your foreground colour. Get a brush in there, and you might want to choose to put a selection around the bulb, but either way, you know the game by now. You can either select it or whatever. You can actually start to brush these out. And then an extra little tip here, I'm just going to do the top rough and ready, and I'm not using a selection, so I will go colouring outside the lines, but just bear with me. One of the things you can do with this, once you've done that on a selection, on a mask, is you can then reduce the density of the mask. So you can fade that back in between not having the mask to partial as you go. So that's another way you can control masking of colour flavours when you've got them as entire screenfuls. Hope that all makes sense. Press pause. Let's do the rewind. I want everyone to talk about cassettes by the end of this. Let's do the rewind, and or listen it in a Deep Purple. Let's do the rewind if you need to and go back through, and we will now move on to something else with this image. So with this picture, what I would actually like to do is tone some of the negative space we've got here based on colours that are already elsewhere in the picture. Which colours to choose and what is a good representation of colours across this picture, I'm going to let Adobe tell me this. So I showed a screenshot earlier of color.adobe.com, and within color.adobe.com you can pick a colour and you can say what are the monochromatic, what's the triads, what's the complementaries, and you can learn from there. Or you can say, give me a range of pictures, give me a range of colours from a particular picture. So I'll select a file. Which one are we looking at? We're looking at this one. So if I choose that, it's now said, and I can drag and drop these all over, but I'm just going to leave them for the moment where they are. This is the 5 swatch colours it's come up with. So I'm going to click save on this. So it's extracted this from this particular picture. Theme successfully saved to my library. Before I move off this though, however, you can explore and you can search. So let's say we search for autumn. It comes back with a whole series of swatches with autumny colours, which we could use in the same way as we're going to use the one I've just done, so I'll not progress on this screen. If I now open up my plugin, you can see it has got these in the library. These previous ones are just some, when I just checked out the mechanics of this earlier to make sure it was still working. But as you can see, it's put them into my library. And if I now click on there and say add to swatches and close that, I've not got a Scooby what that means, nor do I care. It doesn't do anything for me at the moment. But here are the 5 colours it is loaded as extracted from here. So firstly, let's click on that one and notice how it's put it as the active colour straight away. None of this loading it in, loading it out. It's got the active colour. As an active colour, I can now say that I want to have a solid colour adjustment layer. And then with the mask, and choose G for my gradient tool, or come over here and select it from that, and the gradient is black to white. Incidentally, yours might still show those garish purple and yellow if you're following along from earlier. And I just drag a gradient in here. You can see how we're starting to bring that in. It's too strong, that. I want to take it close at the top as a bit of a haze. So, and I'm also going to reduce the opacity. Not as much as that, possibly there, but it's still also on the lighthouse. I don't want it on there. While I'm on my mask, B for brush tool, D for colours, X to get blacks on my foreground, and I will just bring that out from there. I'm not going to bother selecting it and doing a pristine job. You get the gist of what I'm doing here. I'm just taking out some of the overspill on that lighthouse roof itself. Now, what else want to do? Yeah, I want to bring a little bit of one of the darker colours, so I'm actually going to put another solid colour adjustment layer on. And this time, I'm going to click on the darker colour there. And you can see how it's done that. Let's go back to the gradient tool, G for my gradient tool, or click it over here. And I want to get this really down low, possibly even lower than that. Oh, too much. Hang on. About there will do, but I'm really going to roll the opacity back on it. Alright, so let's put those two together. There's more you can do with fiddling with opacities and choosing your blending methods, but I'm just going to put those together and call it swatch grading. So remember, you might not agree with the colours and that I've used, it's more the principles. What I've done here is I've created a swatch from a picture so it expands some of the colours within that picture elsewhere and used it to tone the picture. I hope that made sense and you've learned a little bit more about color.adobe.com, and let's do our last one now because it's time's cracking on. I think what I would like to do with this one is to go and have a look at doing something with monochromatic. So if you remember from our colour wheel, monochromatic is 3 tones and shades of a tint of a colour. I'm not going to turn this whole picture into that, but I want to colour grade the picture in the shadows, in the midtones and in the highlights based on a colour I want to extract from this picture. So I think we'll start off by jumping back into coloradobe.com and go into create, and let's extract a theme. Go and find this picture. There's one of these. Oh, right, first time. There we go. Okay, so we've got that theme. If I've double clicked on that, and we go back to the colour wheel. We've already got that palette there. I want to go to monochromatic. Double click on there, Control V to put in the colour we've just copied, and there we are. So we've got this. Now I'm going to do this a little bit different again from previous versions because I want to show you lots of different ways to do this. So if you're not comfortable with saving things to libraries and things like that, I just call this smash and grab. It's a screen grab, so I don't know the keystroke for PC, but it's Command Shift and 4 on a Mac. It gives me this little thing which I can then draw around here. There we go. That's taking a screenshot for me with very satisfying noise. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to drag the screenshot in as a layer on here. Make it a little bit smaller. I'm just going to tuck it up somewhere there. Okay, so I haven't used swatches. I haven't pulled colours back and forward and things, so I've just literally took a screen grab, albeit I've used Adobe Colour to tell me what those are. Now we're going to use good old curves to sample the tones we want for highlights, shadows and mids, and then replay them. You've seen this before. You must click on the tool, not the mask. And if I double click on the highlights, and I am going to pick that one for my highlight and click OK. Yes, save it as my target, and then I'll go for my midtones. I'm going to click on this one for my midtones, and I'm going to say yes. Double click on this one, and here's the colour I really wanted. This can be for my darks. I'm going to click that there, and yes. I'm just going to go back to the highlights one, and I don't need to pick it here. I just want to just give it a little bit brighter, I think, there. But again, it's based on the monochromatic. So yes. Okay, now I don't need that anymore. I've primed my curves, so all I need to do now is go and apply those. So where in our picture am I going to use for my highlights? Well, I would think initially I'm going to use that paper. Yes, but it's only a very small part, so possibly that's a bit more muted. I'm going to come over here. So single click on my highlights, and I click on there. Midtones. Now then, where are my midtones? I can't really see now. I've coloured too much of the picture. That's where this little chap comes in. If I just hold that eye down, it switches it off while I've got my cursor down, and I'm looking for where I want to put my midtones. And I think I'm going to put it in the greys up here. You can see it next to what we chose for the whites. So if you just have a look at that again, there we go. And I'm going to put it in there for now. We can always unpick any knitting, so it doesn't really matter. So we clicked on there, we went over, and we actually clicked on where we want those to be. And finally darks. So single click on the darks, and let's have a little switch off. Yeah, smack bang in the middle of that table, I think. There you go. So that's nice and rich for now. So off and on. So it's not monochromatic fully, it's been graded based on monochromatic. And then I think put something like a hard light on this one. Make it really rich, but that's too much for my liking. So I'm going to bring the opacity down. About 65. Yeah, I think I'm quite happy with that. So before and after. So the way that this grading works is because we've used a colour from it to give us our starting point, and then we've chose monochromatic versions from there, and then we've applied those using this little trick in curves, which is a real valuable trick when it comes to doing composites and matching parts of component parts of pictures. I've got a video all about composites, which I'll link to now, and that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this. We've had 3 minutes of theory, but more importantly, we've played around with 5 or 6 pictures looking at things. You can get them from Pexels, or you can get the rest of them from down below in the link. We've also linked out where appropriate to luminance in Photoshop, how to use Pexels, how to get started on my captured in glass images, how to use curves, and finally composites. So you know what I'm going to say now. Please consider subscribing. If you think you want to be notified of future videos, click that little bell icon, and give me a thumbs up if it warrants it. If it doesn't warrant it, please tell me why, because I'm always interested in learning and improving. And that's it. I think I'm now going to go off and long for the day when this picture, or rather this site, which is the Lit and Fill in Newcastle, reopens, because it's a marvellous, marvellous building, and really worth getting in there and taking some photographs. Until next time, I'll say bye-bye.